Laurie Myers was born in 1961 as the youngest of 3 children after her siblings Judith and Michael. When Laurie was just 2 years old on October 31st, 1963, Mr. and Mrs. Myers went out for the evening, and Judith, 15 years old at the time, was spending the night with her boyfriend. Michael was left in the care of an older woman named Mrs. Blankenship on their street. We don't know exactly where Laurie was, but I would assume that she was also left with Mrs. Blankenship, but given her age was probably already in bed when Michael snuck out, grabbed a knife, and stuck it into Judith 9 times. To learn how Laurie's suppressed childhood memories may have come back to save her in the end, that's a subversion of expectations, stick around to the end of this video. This video is sponsored by Audible. Welcome to Horror History. In today's lesson, I'm analyzing an innocent teenage girl whose biological sibling becomes the most renowned killer ever to pick up a knife. There are many versions of this character because there are many alternate timelines in the Halloween story. Most Lauries represent different scenarios branching off of Halloween night in 1978, the events of the original Halloween movie. If you've seen me cover other Halloween franchise characters, you already know about the Halloween Express, the train map that I use as an analogy for the Halloween timeline. In this video, I'll be analyzing the original timeline, where Laurie is played by Jamie Lee Curtis while she was in her 20s. There may be other videos where we ride the Halloween Express down alternate routes, but for now, let's take a look at Laurie Strode's first appearance in the Halloween franchise. What would you do if the boogeyman haunting your town was your brother, stalking your every move? Would you hide under your cover? Would you run away to parts unknown? Would you say, at least he doesn't talk a lot? Laurie lost her sister without ever really knowing her at 2 years old. In a way, she lost her brother too, because he was deemed mentally unfit for society and placed in a sanitarium. It would seem that Laurie was taken to visit him at some point. I say this because she later recalls a memory of what appears to be Michael at the sanitarium, but for now, this memory is essentially buried. A couple years later, in 1965, her parents were killed in a car accident, and Laurie was placed in the foster care system. Soon after, she was adopted by the Strode family, where her new father figure was a realtor. Being the last remaining survivor of a pair of tragedies, outside of her now institutionalized brother, got the attention of the governor of Illinois, who realized that she was still young enough to maybe have a normal life. He saw to it that her name was changed and her file was sealed so that nobody could connect her with Michael. For some time, it seemed to have worked. Laurie has completely forgotten about her early life and is living as if it never happened. Her foster parents don't give her any information about her youth.
Why won't you ever tell me anything?
I told you. I'm not your mother.
Did these memories fade as all early memories do, or were they repressed for her own protection? We first meet Laurie Strode in her teenage years as a kind-hearted student, focusing on her grades and her work as a babysitter more than her social life. Unlike her friends, she's more of an introvert, though her babysitting does make her a lot of contacts in the Haddonfield community, like the Doyles with their son Tommy, and the Carruthers, where she babysits a young Rachel. She seems to have a connection with these kids, almost like she's so innocent that she prefers their company to the kids that are her own age.
It's tragic you never go out. You must have a small fortune stashed from babysitting so much.
Guys think I'm too smart.
This aspect of her character would potentially play a role in her survival. On the morning of Halloween in 1978, Mr. Strode asked her to drop off a key at a house that he's selling, which happens to be the Myers house, the same house that 15 years before she would have called her home. I think his confidence to send her there on a casual errand speaks volumes to how everybody felt she had fully recovered. She seems as unafraid of this house as anyone in Haddonfield. While in class that afternoon, Laurie seems bored and stares out the window, but what she finds is more disturbing than she was probably expecting. Staring back at her across the street is a man with a white mask and a brown car. The teacher distracts her with a question, and by the time she looks back across the street, the man has vanished. Laurie looks confused, perhaps wondering if her imagination was playing a Halloween trick. While walking home with her friends that afternoon, Laurie spots the brown car again and now driving up behind them. Her friends think it's a guy from school, but Laurie is not so sure. Further ahead, she sees the man disappear behind some hedges. Her friend Annie investigates, but he's gone before she gets there. Annie believes that it's a boy that has a crush on Laurie.
Poor Laurie. Scared another one away.
Wait, she's done this before? Upon getting home, she notices the masked man standing in her neighbor's yard just staring at her from behind the clothesline. He mysteriously vanishes once again. We can see she's getting pretty freaked out by these encounters. Meanwhile, most of the other high schoolers in Haddonfield are freaking out over something else, the homecoming dance taking place the next night. Laurie and Annie discuss it on the way to their babysitting jobs, and Laurie admits that she's interested in a classmate named Ben Tramer, but she doesn't feel she has the courage to ask him out. And how can you blame her? Ben would literally become the hottest guy in town that evening. Later that night, while she's babysitting Tommy Doyle, Annie shows up and drops off Lindsay Wallace, the child that she had been babysitting, if you want to call it that, across the street. There was an unspoken agreement between the two friends so that Annie could have some alone time with her boyfriend Paul. This was the last time Annie was ever seen alive. There's a clear split in priorities when it comes to Laurie and her friends. They're obsessed with hooking up, even if it means letting their grades and responsibilities slip, while Laurie makes an effort to do everything right. She does her homework and plans out activities for the kids she watches. She even kind of looks after her friends, as we would see later on. For these reasons, when something isn't right, Laurie's gonna notice it before Annie or Linda might have. And that might just be what keeps her alive. Throughout the evening, Tommy keeps asking Laurie about the boogeyman, a legend told to him by his fellow classmates to try to scare him. She dismisses his concerns though, probably having heard the same stories when she was in elementary school. After putting the kids to bed, she receives a weird phone call from her friend Linda, who was also at the Wallaces across the street. What she heard on the other line at first seemed like cries of passion, but the more she hears, the more concerned she becomes. She goes to check on the kids and they're fast asleep, which gives her time to head across the street to see what's up. No one answers the door, but she goes around back and finds the back door left ajar. She searches the seemingly empty house, but no amount of urban legends could have prepared her for what she would find. Some of you who are old boomers may remember the Halloween novelizations. These were books created for fans that couldn't get enough Halloween from the film. They offer a little more background about the characters and some additional scenes and lore. Well, as it turns out, with the new Halloween movies out, they're back, and you can experience them on Audible. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, including horror. You'll also discover exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio. Members get a free title every month for keeps. Plus, there's a great selection of free podcasts. This month, I have to admit, I'm still listening to Salem's Lot. I've been busy, okay? Making that Scream 3 video just decimated my sleep schedule, and I was just like a vegetable. I couldn't really even listen to an audiobook, but I still did make some progress, and if I didn't have Audible, then I probably would have made it no progress. So if you're busy like me, it really is perfect. To try out Audible Premium Plus free for 30 days, visit audible.com/CZsWorld or text CZsWorld to 500-500. You'll find that link written in blood on your mirror, audible.com/CZsWorld. In a bedroom upstairs, her friend Annie is arranged under the tombstone of Judith Myers. Soon after, she comes across the remains of Linda and Bob as well. Stricken and emotionally shattered by what she just found, Laurie runs out of the room to find her worst nightmare waiting for her. Michael stabs in her direction with a kitchen knife, and in her terror, she falls over the railing onto the stairs below. She hobbles as fast as she can to get out of the house and tries to get help from the neighbors, who probably assume she's playing a Halloween trick and shut her out. It also didn't help that she left the door locked without the keys, and she had to chuck a flower pot at the window to wake up Tommy to let her in. Maybe it's a good thing that Michael Myers chose to carve up Haddonfield that night. It would not have been a good look if Tommy's parents came home to find Laurie locked out of the house that she's supposed to be watching, and Tommy sleeping upstairs in a bed with some girl on their block. Laurie sends Tommy back upstairs, turns out the lights, and tries to contact someone to help, but finds the phone lines have been cut. Panic sets in when she realizes one of the downstairs windows has been left open. I don't think she gets enough credit for what she does next. While pretending to plead for her life, she also stealthily arms herself with the best weapon in the room, her knitting needle. When Michael nearly impales her again after popping out from behind the couch, she takes a swing of her own, striking him in the neck with it. Not yet knowing who or what her attacker is, she actually believes that this kills him, which actually makes her behavior even more impressive. I think most people would be a mess if they believed they just murdered someone. And although she's clearly shaken by the encounter, she keeps her head together enough to remember her main priority, protecting Tommy and Lindsay. To her shock and terror, Michael is alive and now closing in on them. But even under this unimaginable amount of panic, she still does everything right. She orders the kids to hide themselves in the closet as she goes to the bedroom and opens the patio door before taking cover in another closet. I think she does this to make it look like she'd climbed out onto the roof for help. It's a nice idea, but it doesn't work. When Michael finds Laurie, she showcases her resourcefulness by poking him in the eye with a wire hanger, causing him to drop his knife. I honestly can't believe that works. I mean, every time I watch it, it's just like, how did she get that thing to stay straight enough to go into his eye? I mean, I maybe would have gone for one of those wooden shades instead, but what can I say? It worked out for her. She retrieves Tommy and Lindsay from their hiding place and tells them to run down the block for help.
Go do as I say.
She may be shy with her school crush, but she's certainly capable of becoming authoritative when the occasion calls for it. However, this puts her in a bad position because she's caught off guard by Michael yet again. He strangles her with his bare hands, and in an act of desperation, she rips off his mask. I'm not going to try to analyze this as a strategic move by Laurie because I think it's pretty clear that this was just instinct. I think a lot of horror fans like to paint her as this rarity, like she's one of the smart ones, but between forgetting her keys, leaving the knife behind, and turning her back to the guy who's trying to slice her up, this isn't a attest that she'd probably be posting up on her fridge. She's passing, but not with flying colors, and not without a little bit of luck as well. And this was her luckiest moment, because when she pulls off Michael's mask, a gunshot rings out from the darkness, and a man in a trench coat, who we know as Dr. Samuel Loomis, shoots Michael several times, knocking him off the balcony and saving Laurie's life. He tells her that that was in fact the boogeyman, and she breaks down into tears. Between the cuts she received from Michael and her physical and mental exhaustion from that night's events, they actually have to take her away in the stretcher, and in the ambo, she's very adamant about not being put to sleep.
Don't let him put me to sleep.
After arriving at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, she is again adamant with the doctor that she not be sedated. What is the reasoning for this? I don't think Laurie herself fully understands. I think the desire not to go to sleep is coming from her subconscious mind. Earlier, I discussed how she was able to suppress her childhood memories about what happened to her family in the mid-1960s. This was basically done as a defense mechanism, so that she could go back to living a semi-normal life without constantly being reminded of those painful memories. She didn't do this on purpose, it was just her subconscious brain trying to protect her. I should note that in real life, the idea of repressed memories, or as the American Psychiatric Association puts it, dissociative amnesia, is not commonly accepted as a real phenomenon, but since we're in the world of Halloween and not the real world, I'm willing to look past that. So Laurie didn't want to go to sleep because those harmful memories had to go somewhere, and some part of her realized that it was her dreams where the truth was hidden. Dr. Mixter ignores her request, however, and sedates her. When she came to, she would receive some horrifying information, making her experiences to that point seem that much scarier. Laurie wakes up to a hospital employee named Jimmy who fills her in on who her mysterious attacker was. She recognizes the name in relation to the Myers house, but does not understand why Michael has chosen her to hunt. Jimmy is kicked out by the charge nurse, who tells Laurie that they're having trouble getting in contact with her parents because the phones are not working. As the clock creeps into the earliest part of November, Laurie eventually succumbs to her exhaustion and falls asleep. Sure enough, she dreams of some creepy memories from her youth, including her foster mother refusing to tell her about her past and a strange familiar boy looking out a window. I think her brain is slowly putting together the pieces about who this forgotten boy is, because her experience that evening, in particular the moment where she tore off Michael's mask, is slowly kicking that part of her brain back into gear. On some level, she seems terrified by this, and not wanting to dig into her past any further, she does everything she can to stay awake, eventually resulting in her just sleeping with her eyes wide open, which concerns the medical staff. Eventually, Laurie wakes up. I'm guessing it's right here, while the nurse is investigating a disturbance outside. Between that and the cut phone lines, I guess she realized that something was up at this hospital, and that maybe she hadn't evaded the danger quite yet. She sets up a decoy in her bed using pillows, and can we just pause for a second? Why is this a movie trope? I talked about this exact same trap when I covered Andy Barkley from Child's Play. I guess the idea is that the bad guy will come in, see this lump under the bed, and then go attack that instead of immediately going to find his victim. But what does this save you, like 2 seconds? I mean, you're better off just not taking the time to set up the decoy. Anyway, this leads to her wandering the halls in a dazed state, trying to get her hands on a working phone to no avail. She collapses in a ball on the floor, and we're just forced to sit there for 22 seconds watching her fall asleep. This goes on way too long. Eventually, Laurie gets back to her feet, still in a bit of a drugged up state, and the nurse tries to come get her, and Laurie turns just in time to see Michael Myers stab her in the back with a scalpel. And this is Laurie's reaction. She hobbles away in the slowest chase ever. Laurie is slowed by her injuries and sedatives, and Michael is just a slow walker. That's how he is. She ends up barely, and I mean barely, evading him behind a closing elevator door. Some people really will do anything to avoid using the stairs. Anyway, Laurie hides in a random car, which turns out to be Jimmy's car, but it won't start because the fuel line has been cut. And he also collapses onto the horn, drawing Michael's attention back to that. She does, however, see a possible chance to get to safety when Dr. Loomis pulls up with a state marshal. She tries calling out for help, but when she screams, she's not able to produce enough sound to get their attention. When I did the horror history episode on Laurie's daughter, Laurie Lloyd, I talked about how she, at one point, suffered a condition known as selective mutism, rendering her unable to speak. As it turns out, this condition can be brought on by a number of factors, and genetic makeup is one of them. Laurie's inability to speak only lasts a few moments, but given that her brother Michael stopped speaking after his traumatic event on Halloween, and her eventual daughter Jamie lost her voice for a year under similar circumstances, that could be the reason that she's not able to call for help. It also fits in with the theme of dreams and nightmares present in Halloween 2, which I talk about more in this episode of Things You Missed. Laurie is chased by Michael again, and Dr. Loomis eventually lets her in just before Michael comes crashing through the door. Loomis shoots him down, but at this point, his ability to rise back up and give chase is no surprise to either of them. They find shelter in an empty operating room. Loomis tries handing Laurie his gun, but she's hesitant to take it.
Take it.
You would think in a life or death situation like this, she would want to arm herself. I mean, we've already seen that she has no problem fighting back based on her actions earlier that night, so what's going on here? This could go back to the innocence of her character, but it may also be the realization dawning on her that the Michael Myers before her is the very same boy seen staring out the window in her dreams, her own brother. Michael stabs Loomis and turns his attention to Laurie, who comes to her senses and shoots him in the face, temporarily blinding him. While he is hopelessly slashing at the air, she sees Dr. Loomis opening compressed gas canisters in the room. Realizing that he's being lured away by the sound, she follows suit, which makes it harder for him to track them using the sound of their movements. After receiving the word from Loomis, she runs out of the room and down the hall when she feels the room she left behind explode and knock her off of her feet. When Laurie turns to look at the blaze, to her absolute horror, a burning figure is walking towards her. Laurie doesn't even move when she sees this, almost as if she's given up the fight. If stabbing him, poking his eye out, shooting him 13 times, and blowing him up was not enough to stop him, maybe Michael just could not be defeated. However, that would be as far as he would go, as Laurie watches him collapse face first for the final time. Emergency services show up at the scene that morning to put out the fire and rescue her. She's wheeled out of the hospital to yet another ambulance. News crews try to speak with her, but she basically gives them the Marshawn Lynch treatment and refuses to speak with the media. She asks to sit in the front, perhaps not wanting to relive any part of the journey she had just been through. All in all, Laurie Strode was traumatized by that evening's events. She discovered the deaths of her 3 friends, nearly lost her own life, witnessed the murder of a nurse, and played a part in an explosion that all but killed 2 people. I'm sure any thoughts of attending that homecoming dance were already out the window at this point, as she would probably be spending the next 24 hours in another hospital, but she would later discover that Ben Tramer, the boy she was interested in attending the dance with, had also been killed that Halloween night. Maybe it is because Laurie has dealt with tragedy her entire life, but she actually moves on pretty quickly from Ben Tramer and ends up getting together with a man named Mr. Lloyd almost immediately. There's a popular fan theory that Mr. Lloyd is actually Jimmy, because we never learn his last name, he seems interested in her, and the two share a bond in having gone through the most terrifying night ever together. But I can neither confirm or deny that he is Mr. Lloyd. It's only a little over a year later that she becomes pregnant with their child, and in either late 1980 or early 1981, she gives birth to a daughter named Jamie. I think her name goes against the whole Jimmy is Mr. Lloyd theory because it would just be confusing having a household consisting of Jimmy and Jamie. But if that is the case, it would not have been a problem for very long, because in November of 1987, Laurie and Jamie's father get into a fatal car accident, just like Laurie's parents before her. We don't know much about those final years leading up to Laurie's death, but it at least seems as if her and Jamie's father had a good relationship with their daughter.
I know you miss your parents. It hasn't been that long.
It's been 11 months.
Jamie is left with a shoebox containing photos of her mom when she was younger, and curiously, a photo of Michael as well, perhaps suggesting that Laurie did teach her about her dark family history. If you want to see me speculate further about Laurie and Jamie's limited time together, you'll want to watch Jamie's episode of Horror History, which you can find by clicking that video on the left. Remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.